I think just kind of emphasizing the basics. I think there's a very human tendency, and this sounds negative. I don't mean it in a negative way, but there's a human tendency to look for the easy way, to look for the secret, to look for the magic. Oh, if we just pitch our oars at this certain, or if we calibrate something, or if we get our this, that, the other set right, or we get our swing down, and all those things do matter. But the reality is there is no easy way. It's just recognize that the simplicity of consistent hard work. And if you do that, you put the time in, wow, like magic, you're going to start to go faster and faster. And all the little things do matter. They just don't matter that much. And they certainly don't take the place of consistent hard work. And that's kind of fun when you just realize that's all it's going to take. It's going to take some time, and it's going to take just some stubborn commitment, for lack of anything better.
All right, let's jump in. So for everyone listening, we have Coach Greg Myhr, head coach, Marietta College, which I believe is your 7th year out at Marietta. Kind of leading the charge out that way. Very excited to talk to Coach Myhr, who I've had the chance to get to know just from years of his time in Philly, a few years coaching at my alma mater at St. Joe's, also spending time at George Washington, Penn, and a bunch of other schools. And then obviously here having some success out in Marietta, Ohio. And very excited to talk to Coach Myhr. I have so many questions. I want to be efficient with his time, but definitely someone I've wanted on for a long time now. But Coach, let's kick things off. Just give people a little bit of an intro into your background as a coach, and also just what are we gearing up for what's Marietta gearing up for, kind of as I think you said week 4 of the season thus far, like what's on the horizon. Just take that wherever you want, but a little bit about your background, and then tell us where we are at this stage of the season.
Great. Well, first off, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here, and been following what you've been doing for a while. Coach Leslie and I shared the same position at St. Joe's, so we've got some shared background here. So my background, I guess, was I rode for a couple of years in high school. Was lucky enough to have a Wisconsin athlete who coached us for a summer, just during the summer program at Potomac Boat Club, and he told me crazy stories about this place in Madison, Wisconsin, which I don't know if I believed them or not, but they were still great stories. John was a fantastic storyteller, and he got us to come check it out, and everything turned out to be true. Everything he talked about, it was a wild place, and it definitely fit. And I was lucky enough to be there with some really good people, some excellent coaches, and had just an amazing time at Wisconsin. And I majored in rowing. I guess I got my degree in philosophy, but that was a way to stay in school and keep rowing. And it was an amazing education in that way. And I don't think I ever had any plan whatsoever to be a coach. I don't. In many ways, I still don't feel like I know very much about rowing. I certainly didn't think I knew much then. But like many coaches, I think I just sort of forgot to leave the boathouse. I graduated, I stayed in Madison. It was a great place to be. I was working at bike shops, but I essentially spent my spare time at the boathouse. And if you hang around long enough, you're going to be asked to do things. And if you do them reasonably competently, eventually you're going to be asked to join the staff, or at least I was. And I was very lucky to be able to do that. And I got to be an assistant coach for Randy Jablonic, or Jabbo as he's known, as a legendary coach. And I rode for him towards the tail end of his coaching career. And I got to coach with him. And coaching with Jabbo was essentially just being his buddy, being his little buddy in the launch and listening to what he was doing and basically hanging out and, in many respects, doing what I did when I was on the team, just eating up all of the craziness that he dished our way. And Jabbo he's a Pied Piper. I mean, he is seemingly constantly in a good mood, very intense guy, but always happy, very upbeat. And I always used to say that you would follow him to the ends of the earth, not because you thought it was necessarily going to be an intelligent thing to do, but just because it was going to be a wild ride like you would never experience anywhere else. And he is a fantastic guy. He's still kicking out there in Madison, still as full of life as ever. So that was great. And then, in conjunction with that, Chris Clark had taken over the freshman team, and at that time, the freshman team was the first year team for every collegiate oarsman. You had to spend a year on a freshman team, so it was essentially the first team that any athlete got to be a part of at any college. So a freshman coach had amazing influence over not just that freshman class, but over the overall team, because that's where the culture started. And I should back up a moment in that I was lucky enough to row for a guy named Dan Gain, who remains a very, very good friend of mine now. I was terrified of him when he was my freshman coach. I was probably terrified of him all the way through college. I mean, probably the toughest guy I've ever met, single-handedly. And it took a long time to realize that he's a really, really nice, good guy also. But as far as being the measure of what it meant to be tough, I would still hold Dan up against anybody else out there. So, whether it was easy or not, we learned a lot from Dan. and I talk to Dan probably once or twice a week. Even now, he's been the head coach at Gonzaga University for seemingly 50 years. It hasn't been that long, but it's been a long time. But Chris Clark also brought a dimension. Chris Clark being the incoming freshman coach that was there as I started coaching, brought a dimension of training that really clicked. And, part of working with Jabbo and the varsity team, I also got to, in some respects, I was still sort of training. I don't know that I had any goal in mind. I was just still working out, basically, still training. And basically, I thought, how hard could it be to train with the freshmen? They're just freshmen. And it was probably the hardest I ever worked. And I started pulling scores I'd never seen. And the systematic way in which Chris ran his teams was eye-opening. It was just, things started to make sense. And it was... there's parts of that I think I'd probably still stay with. But if there's anything that I feel like I've tried to emulate, is what at least I thought that I was taking from what Chris did with his freshmen, and what he did by extension with me. As just sort of a hanger-on, just still playing the role with filling out his votes when he needed them. So it was a pretty cool time. It didn't really have any other responsibilities, just hanging out where I wanted to be hanging out anyway. They were paying me, and I got to essentially still be on the team, right? and things started getting fast. It was a really. I think Chris and Jabbo worked together really well. I think for Jabbo, he started to see that he was probably in his last few years, and I'm not going to say that he got re-energized, but he definitely. He turned the volume up a bit, and that was a pretty neat. I guess it was just there was a neat synergy between those two, and it was fun to be a part of that.
Just with Wisconsin, I have to kind of poke even deeper, because I as you know, I spent a few months out there my first year coaching, which I know was a connection through you and getting out there when I first started at St. Joe's, and I got to spend 2 months finishing off with 2 or 3 months spent finishing off with Canadian Henley up that way, with summer program. And I credit a lot of, just my start to coaching. Like I got what I learned at St. Joe's and amazing experience being a walk-on there. And then when I got to Wisconsin for those 2 months, just seeing the athlete, the mentality, how they train, even in the summer, the off season, million meter challenges and all these fun things that they embarked on. And I think it really helped enlighten me on what else is out there when I did return to Philly. And Madison itself is an unbelievable, like literally, I tell people all the time, probably one of the greatest cities that many people haven't been to. And you probably, can attest to that as an amazing place. But what did you learn out there? What are things that you learned as a coach at Wisconsin that you feel like have stuck or stood the test of time throughout the rest of your coaching career, from that training or what you learned from Coach Clark, what you learned just, training and being a coach at the same time? Like, what are things that you kind of stood the test of time in your own coaching today?
It is a great city, and it's it's funny. I hadn't been there in a number of years, and you start to think, well, maybe it was just a great part of my life, and I'm sort of remembering it through rose-colored glasses. And I went back last fall for the 150th anniversary of Wisconsin rowing, and it's even cooler than I remember. I mean, it really is an amazing place. No, I would say probably everything that I think about rowing probably comes from there, I would say. From Jabo, my experience with Jabo was, I kind of look at rowing and coaching rowing as, it's all sorts of things. You can let yourself get really annoyed and angry by the things that you have to deal with every day. I mean, nothing ever goes true to plan. It just doesn't, right? Even on the best of days, I mean, you're dealing with unforeseen circumstances, and that can really just kind of piss you off. And Jabba was a really intense guy. He took it really seriously, but he just celebrated just the ridiculousness of rowing. And I don't mean that in that he didn't think it was frivolous, but he celebrated that this was a really over-the-top sort of thing to be doing. And I saw Jabo get angry. I saw Jabo get very angry at times. But he never lost sight of the fact that it was a joyful experience. And he would bring that joy even in the dead of winter when it was 15 below. It wasn't going to get light for 2.5 more hours, and you were heading out to go run the stadium for an hour if you could find the stairs under the snow. And he would blast polka music out. His office was in the stadium, and he would open up the doors. I guess he kept a parka in there. I don't know what he would do. He would put the speakers out the window and blast polka music while you're trying to find the stadium stairs. And every crazy story I ever heard about Jabo, which I thought was BS, turned out to be true. And there were more. I mean, it's just a larger than life, very. He doesn't remind you of anyone. He's very much his own character, and that's I can get pissed off at a lot of the small things, like we all can. But I try to keep in mind how much joy he brought on a daily basis to something that can certainly become drudgery, I would say. And from Coach Clark, it's his being assistant coach for Chris. And I was Chris's freshman coach for 6 years after Jabo retired, and Chris took over the program. There were a lot of times we would spend all day preparing for something. Maybe we thought, okay, we have to move our fleet to a different part of the lakes. We have to be ready to practice. We know what's coming. We can't let practice be diminished in any way. And we'd spend 4 or 5 hours moving trailers, re-rigging boats, moving oars, moving whatever we had to in between morning and afternoon. And half an hour before, plans would change, something would happen, and everything we had just done was completely not necessary. And you can fall down the hole of thinking, well, that's just stupid. Why are we wasting so much time? But the beautiful part of it was the willingness to go to whatever length you had to go to make practice as good as it could be on any given time. And as often as that would sometimes happen, that we would spend all day doing work that didn't matter in the end, a lot of times it really did matter. Meaning that because we had spent that much time doing things, practice went off and we got what we needed to get done. And the team got better because of it. And that willingness to burn whatever energy it took to get every little thing you thought you could get out of a day or get out of a practice, that was a mindset that I don't know that I emulate that as well as I'd like to. But I keep it in the back of my mind all the time that nothing is wasted energy if you think it may help your practice. And it's easy to say, oh, well, we'll get it tomorrow. The weather's not going to let us do this. Or you can say, okay, how do we make it happen? What do we got to do? How much time is it going to take? We got time. Let's get a few more guys. Let's make this happen. And even if we decide in the end we're not going to do it, it's still worth it. And that's a level of intensity and a level of unwillingness to yield to circumstances. And as gorgeous and wonderful as Wisconsin is as a city and a place to be, it can be a really challenging place to row. It could be an incredibly challenging place to train, not the least of which is because it's frozen solid half the year. But when it's not frozen solid, there are times it looks like the North Sea. And it can be as dangerous, if not that I've spent any time in the North Sea, but it can be an incredibly challenging and dangerous place to be if you're not on your game. The least of which is trying to get something productive done. So the amount of planning and creativity and just flat out work to make practice happen there can be pretty extraordinary. And, that's not the only thing I think I've taken from Coach Clark. But that's one of the really, I'd say, main lessons is do it, burn it, make it happen. Even if, do everything you can to get everything out of what you have in front of you, because you may not get it back. And I think his teams reflect that. I mean, I don't see his teams wasting a lot of time. I don't see them sitting around necessarily, woe is me, the weather's terrible. Oh, we can't because of this. We can't. Can't doesn't really factor in very often. And that's, we try to do that. Sometimes, as it turns out, we can't, but we sure as hell try not to let that get in the way.
That's I love, and I think one of the things. I mean, number one, that's like you kind of highlighted it before, but like the athletes and the toughness factor of a lot of like just kind of that mentality at Wisconsin, both from the coaches to, I think, just how it dovetails into the walk-ons and the mentality that is, a lot of the Wisconsin rowing mentality, I think, is just echoes a lot of other parts of the rowing community where it's like, hey, when you think about what's going on out there, the mentality and the toughness and the training and the willingness to get things done, no matter what external factors are at play, definitely, is something that a lot of people know about and are aware of, just not even being around there. Is that like, is that like, are there things there like with being even a freshman coach for a long period of time and being a part of the team and getting athletes to the program, and like, are there things on that front where it's just from program development that you now take with you into all the other stops that you've had along the way with athlete development, attracting walk-ons, all these different things? Are those?
I think so, and I guess I'm getting older, and maybe there are things that are happening that are beyond me, couldn't possibly be. But one thing with basing teams as heavily as we did and as they still do on walk-ons, kids that know nothing about rowing, don't even know it exists as a sport, is sort of the simplicity of what matters in rowing. And I think that's certainly one of the things that attracted me to the sport, not being a terribly gifted athlete in the sense of coordination or whatever else. Rowing was something that immediately struck me as all you really needed to be was stubborn and hard-headed and unyielding. And, for someone who could never play basketball to save my life or hit a tennis ball or kick a soccer ball or any of that, I tried. But it was, it was an exercise in embarrassment for the most part. Something where all you really had to do was put your head down and get angry and just go longer than the guy next to you. And seeing how far that could take you was really kind of awesome. And, sort of translating that to guys that know nothing about the sport and just giving them the basics. Especially when you're coaching freshmen. And it was a really fun time because you were coaching kids that knew nothing, and you were going up against really some of the best, prep school and other high school athletes this country had. It wasn't hugely international when I was coaching. It was a little bit, but not like it is now. And it was really fun to go east, sometimes go west, right? With a bunch of guys who maybe sometimes it's their first time on an airplane. And they know what they're doing. And they also kind of realize that all the other stuff, all the, little nuances and this, that, they matter, but they don't matter that much. What really matters is how hard have you trained, how hard can you pull, and how willing are you to continue going or give more, right? And those are the broad strokes. And I remember I had one really fast team when I was coaching freshmen. And that was a team where we just got lucky with the guys that came together at the same time. And we got lucky with some of the recruits that were part of that team as well. And they were undefeated all the way through the Eastern sprints. I mean, they had open water in the sprints final within the first minute. And I remember for the IRA, it was prior to the sprints, because that was during finals, and we had at least one athlete, maybe two, that couldn't get out there in time for the practice. So we would usually go out a couple of days early. And I ended up jumping into the boat for one of the practices. I'd been their coach, and they'd been really successful all spring. And two thoughts I had were, holy shit, this is the fastest boat I've ever been in, and holy shit, do they row like shit. I mean, they're burning and wasting so much energy. It's literally one of the worst rows I've ever been a part of, but also one of the most exciting, because it was definitely the fastest and strongest. So I was like, God, I'm a really shitty coach, but God, these guys pull, right? And they were good. They were really good. And those guys went on and did some pretty amazing things. One of them is Bo Hoopman, who's now the head coach, two-time Olympic gold medalist and the head coach at Wisconsin. Phenomenal guy, and he was surrounded by others as well. So the basics of just ripping, just getting in there, having the strength, having the endurance, having the ability to do that, and then the willingness to just keep going. And they did not win the IRA, right? They went for it. They had it at one point, and Cal was the better team. So the wheels kind of came off at the end of that race. So it was that was fun. But I think just kind of emphasizing the basics. I think there's a very human tendency, and this sounds negative. I don't mean it in a negative way, but there's a human tendency to look for the easy way, to look for the secret, to look for the magic. Oh, if we just pitch our oars at this certain, or if we calibrate something, or if we get our this, that, the other set right, or we get our swing down, and all those things do matter. But the reality is there is no easy way. It's just recognize that the simplicity of consistent hard work. And if you do that, you put the time in, wow, like magic, you're going to start to go faster and faster. And all the little things do matter. They just don't matter that much. And they certainly don't take the place of consistent hard work. And that's kind of fun when you just realize that's all it's going to take. It's going to take some time, and it's going to take just some stubborn commitment, for lack of anything better.
No, and I have to I have to come even deeper with that, because that's one area I wanted to really go to, because I think just, knowing you and kind of just having heard from, just the programs that you've been a part of, and just the culture that you build, and just having conversations with you, even brief conversations, like you always kind of hear, like, hard work at its foundation is the root of a lot of what it sounds like, your mentality as a coach, which I think I personally, that's the approach I've always tried to kind of implement in my own career. It's the only reason I was successful as a walk-on in any way, because I'm not afraid to get on the erg and kind of just put the training in. And I think there's countless examples of that who have taken it to huge astronomical levels, who just, it's rooted in hard work. And I think a lot of that in your coaching career, like, I'm sure you've probably been engaged with having to have that balance of, okay, well, what does hard work look like? And where does, like, again, you kind of alluded to it, but the catch timing and the rowing well, and how's the boat feel, and the mentality that you do hear a lot in rowing in today's world, which, again, like you said, like, it's important things to consider and make sure that you are rowing to the best of your abilities. But if it's not fundamentally rooted in hard work, you ain't going to go that far to begin with. And where did that evolve? And is that something that you still try to incorporate today? Again, that foundation, that root of consistent hard work, which I absolutely love as a mentality. So just talk a little bit more about that.
My assumption is that that probably is at the foundation of success in any sport, and maybe the success in anything, is putting in consistent effort towards it. I do think rowing is a very simple sport, meaning that there may not be nearly as much nuance as there is in being able to decipher football plays and throwing a perfect pass to exactly the right person, and that to me, that is a level of intelligence that I can't comprehend. Rowing, for some reason, tends to attract fairly intelligent people, but I don't think it takes a ton of intelligence to put your head down and go necessarily. So yeah, I think Jabo said something sort of off the cuff years ago, something to the effect of, you have to be in shape to row well. Like, if you're not in shape, there's no way in hell you're going to row well. And that makes a lot of sense. If you're in a practice and you're struggling to just get your breath, you're not thinking about holding your body up at the front end. You're not thinking about getting square in time, dropping the catch in, and all of that. You're just trying to survive. So, in some respects, I feel like what I would call the old method of learning to row was you just row far enough away from the boathouse that eventually guys just stop doing inefficient things because you have to get home, and you don't have to say much. You just keep rowing until you stop doing dumb things. And that's kind of a blockheaded way to learn to do stuff, but it's also, I think that kind of is, in a lot of respects, how you learn to move boats. You learn to move boats well because out of necessity, right? If you're gonna survive, you have to be able to hang on to your resources as long as you can. But no, I would think that's probably a pretty major tenet of any rowing program. I mean, to pinpoint where that came from, I just think that's a pretty basic part of the sport. I do think it's easy to get drawn off into rabbit holes of, I have to follow this diet. I have to have this. If we do this, then we're going to be successful. If we have the correct warm up, if we stretch in a certain way, I don't know. It's interesting. It's felt like there was a year or two when, after every race, you'd see not just one, but a bunch of teams all standing in the water, like cooling down their thighs. And I'm sure scientifically there's something to that. I guarantee you there must be. But it's interesting that you don't really see it anymore. It was just it was the thing for a while. And it doesn't, things matter when you think they matter, for sure. There's a psychological element to that. But it's pretty simple when you just stop looking for the easy way out. And looking for the easy way probably is why humans have progressed in every direction, right? Looking for an easier, better way to do things is a very, very human and an awesome thing to do. And it's probably led to advances in rowing as well. But the easiest thing is to stop looking for it and just put in the effort. And it's amazing how it does work. It's not overnight. That's probably the hardest part. Guys start doing what you tell them to do, and a month or two down the road, they think, "Well, I'm exactly what I was when I started this. It hasn't changed me a bit." And you're like, "Yep." That's the way it works. Keep going. Just keep going, and eventually you look back and, wow, I've come a long way.
And to piggyback off that, one area that I wanted to dive into with you so bad is just training as a whole, particularly on the erg. Like I really love the erg. It's something that the athletes I work with, it's helping them actually learn how to use it and
Yep.
learn how to push themselves and actually maximize it rather than a lot of narratives where no one likes the erg and we don't erg, and they only erg on bad weather days and test days, versus the erg is actually a incredibly integral part of your training. Like, you got to get better on it to get faster, and you got to put in the work. And a couple of things that when I first started coaching that I think stemmed from some of the things that you brought were just like no average split is something that my garage is now known for, where high school kids will walk in and immediately they'll try to put on average split. I'm like, take it off. Like, you want average split, pull the same split every single stroke for 40 minutes. And that's kind of those are little things that have literally been with me since I first started college coaching, and just talk about the erg, talk about utilizing it, training with it, how you feel like it factors into rowing performance. And again, this is an area that I definitely want to dive into, and I'm really passionate about, and I would love to hear your thoughts.
Right. Well, I think the erg is scary because it's so good at measuring you. It's very good, and there's very few excuses you can make about it. Even on the water, you can say, there's a headwind. I got waked. It was just, there was the current was off today or something. The erg, the weather can make a difference. If it's cold out, you can feel a lot better on the erg than when it's hot. But it's a pretty unequivocal measure of what you're able to do that day. But by the same token, I think because it's such a good measure, I think it's a really nice tool for developing confidence. I think it's all about developing confidence. And in and amongst that, you're also developing strength and you're realizing what you can do. But most of it's confidence. And if particularly if you ever let yourself get a little bit out of shape and then you're trying to get back in the first time you sit down on the erg, whatever you do on the erg feels like hell, right? It's just like, oh man, it's nowhere near what it used to feel like. But what's interesting is the very next day, if you sit down and do that same piece, it's already going to feel better. And the next day, it's going to feel better again and again and again. And you can't tell me that you're making physiological gains that quickly, one day to the next. You're probably getting more and more tired in a lot of respects. But whatever the neurological, psychological combination is, you're getting used to it again. And you're remembering that you're okay. And you're realizing that, as terrible as that was, I finished it. Hey, I can go a little faster. Look at that. I'm already a little bit better. And you start feeling better about yourself, and you start feeling stronger, and you start feeling more competent on the erg. So I think used correctly, it's a confidence builder more than anything else. And I think that's probably something that one of the major things that Chris Clark was really good with his freshman teams. And it was an eye-opener for me. It was not the way we had trained in college. The erg was a relatively new thing when I was in college. It's weird to say that, but it hadn't been around that long, at least the concept too. Maybe 8 or 10 years at most. So learning how to use that in a way, and not they had ergs before, but they weren't as consistent. It wasn't as, for lack of a better term, scientific in a way. So, one of the things that Chris was very good with, so let's say you're in a 10K cycle, you're doing 10K tests throughout the fall, and you're trying to get faster on those 10Ks. Well, you don't necessarily just do 10K after 10K after 10K, but you work in and around the distance. So you might do, okay, let's do 2 by half an hour. That's pretty close to 10K. Let's see how it went. But I did 2 of them, right? It wasn't quite 10K, but I got close. I did 2. Holy shit, if I can do that, then can I take a step on my 10K? 10 by 5 minutes, 2 minutes rest. Again, very similar to 10K effort. And all of these things are sort of, it's a little bit of a change of pace. You can say, well, it's been a while since I've done this workout. Let's see what I can do with it. And there's parts of it that are easier. 10 by 5, you get a break every 5 minutes, right? And that's kind of nice. It's also 50 minutes of work, which is a pretty damn slow 10K. I mean, you're going a lot further than 10K. But all of that kind of working in and around that distance to then come back to your test distance and say, okay, with the preparation I've done since the last 10K, what can I do now? And it's, I think I made this analogy up, and I still like it. To me, getting faster on the erg over a distance is a little bit like you have light posts in a line that are extending into the fog, into the dark fog. And when when you're standing at one light post, you really can't see the next one. But if you hang on to it and stretch, and you just, you're stretched towards the next one, and maybe you let go of the one you're at, you're still close enough. You can see the glow. You can start to see the glow of the next one. And to me, that's like going about one split faster than you have. If you're trying to jump more than a split, you're getting lost in that dark fog, and the terror sets in. And even if you're capable, you're certainly capable of going faster than that. But your subconscious is going to take over. Your self-protection is going to take over. If you're trying to do more than that one light post on any given test, good luck. It'll feel good for about the first third, and then you'll start to question it. And then you'll convince yourself there's no effing way you can possibly keep going. Whereas if you can see the glow of that light post, doesn't mean you're going to make it, but you have a chance. You have a chance, right? Because you've taken a measurable step. Now, let's say you do make it. Boom, you've grabbed that light post. Hey, I just pulled my PR. I've got a new light post. Okay, now you can step beyond. You can start to look towards that next one. And that's very much a mental game. Very much so. But it also, again, it kind of feeds back into that building confidence. And in and around, you're doing a lot of work on the erg, for sure. So it is physiological. But the focus really is trying to train your head to be able to take those next steps. And a corollary, and I've said this for a long time, I love it when we do a test or we do a workout and the team knocks it out of the park, where it's 99, 100% guys just nail it, just kill it. Okay, good. They were ready for this. Maybe I didn't ask for enough, but that's fantastic. You learn the most about athletes, and I think athletes learn the most about themselves when they're having the bad day, when they're going for a step and it's not happening, and they know it's not happening. It's not going to happen. And then the question is, what can you do? How close can you stay? Nothing about that piece is making you happy. When you finish it, that score is not going to make you happy. It's not going to rank you where you want to be. Can you stay within a reasonable distance of what you were trying to hit? And that's hard. That's really, we all just want to give up, right? Fuck this. I don't want to do I don't want to do this anymore. But when you can get to a place where you can keep it within a split, when you can stay, and a split's a little bit arbitrary, but it works, right? Whatever the distance is, keep it within a split of what your PR is. That's a pretty good bad piece, right? That's a passable piece. You let it go beyond that, it was either a really bad day, a lot of things were stacked against you, or you really weren't there. And to me, I equate that to, you have a practice with 3 even 8s, you're doing whatever you're doing, and one of them falls off the face of the earth, right? That's the guy on the erg who can't keep it within a split, right? You're like, well, shit, it's not happening. And all of a sudden, it's not happening becomes, we are gone. We're just gone. So it all kind of ties together, and it really, I do want to see what guys do on their bad days, because everybody has bad days. And like it or not, as much as you set your team up, to be successful and have a good day on race day, you're asking 8 guys, 9 guys, if you include the coxswain, which I try to do, you're asking 9 guys to have a great day at the same time. And the chances of that happening aren't great. They're not great. But if you know that they're either going to have a good day or they're going to have an okay day, you're going to be dangerous every single time, right? You're going to be close to what you are every single time. And call that toughness, call that training, call whatever you want. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for the guys that no matter what are going to keep giving that. And that's, some of the stuff that a lot of teams are now using with the telemetry and all that. I think that starts to give you that information in a way that, and I haven't started using it yet. I would like to. I would like to know when a boat falls off the face of the earth, I would like to know who let it go first. Or who did it start with? because you've been in boats like that where suddenly it just gets heavy. And it gets heavy, you're like, it tests you even more. Like, well, if we didn't have a chance before, now we really don't have a chance. So who cracks first, who cracks second, and who never cracks? Who's the tough, just ridiculously stupid person who never stops, right? And I would love to know that. I would love the guys in the boat to know that we're going to know that. And I don't know if I'm allowed to do this sort of thing anymore. I would love to post that information in the locker room after practice. You want to know what happened on piece number 4? Here's the information right here, and everybody's going to see it, right? Because that would make rowing in a boat just as scary as rowing the erg, I would think, if not more so. I got off topic.
No, I love that. I love that, and I like it's to your point. Well, that is in many ways what makes the erg so valuable. You know exactly who crashed and burned on the 4th piece out of 5, and or this or that.
Yeah. And that's where everything gets on a score sheet. Everybody sees the score sheet. They all look forward to going and seeing it at breakfast or dinner or whatever the test was. But that it puts a spotlight on you, right? And that's a lot of pressure. And it's not easy. We all talk about, oh, it was so great being on teams. I don't know if I'm tough enough to be on a team these days. I do my own thing. If I have a good day, I tell everybody about it. If I have a bad day, I don't tell anybody about it, and nobody gives a shit anyway, nor should they. But it's tough. It's tough being on teams. You really do have to be a hard character to be able to handle this stuff and be able to absorb the failure, because it's interesting. We were having conversations about why summer rowing is so valuable in so many ways. You got done with the IRA or whatever your season-ending race is, and if someone said, "Hey, actually, good news, everyone, we have one more week of IRA training," you'd probably quit the sport. Like I'm done, right? As much as I love this, I need to be done now. The main part of that is the pressure. There's a lot of pressure. And it's fun. You want that pressure, but you also can't stay there forever. So then you get to the summertime. And I'm not talking about being on a national team or anything like that. I'm talking about just doing the summer circuit, racing, racing club nationals, racing Canadian Henley, just the summer races. And you train really hard, and you race really hard, and you race a lot. And it's totally relaxed, and the stakes couldn't possibly be lower. No one cares. It's really just, can you get this race done in enough time to grab that other boat and get back to the starting line to go again? You're racing probably just as hard. You learn to race because you're racing a ton, and it's fun because no one really cares, right? It's just like a practice. It's like a glorified practice, and you learn so much from that. But it's also, I think, because you're not scared of failing, you learn to race harder. Meaning that it's okay to throw yourself at the windshield and see if you can hang on. And sometimes you can't. And you come out of that like, holy shit, that was a new level. That was unbelievable. I can't believe we were able to do that. And that changes you. I don't know if it's as easy to do that when the stakes are high. When you're lined up against St. Joe's and those guys are going to take yet another shirt from you, right? You know what I'm saying. It's a little bit tougher when that fear of failure starts to rear its head more. But I also think you have to be willing to fail. You have to be, to achieve anything worth achieving beyond mediocrity. Something that's been really fun here is that we were, it's weird to say that, part of the pandemic was actually fortunate, but the pandemic plus some really engaged and generous alums, we have a bunch of singles, and we have water that more often than not, especially this time of year, is incredibly safe. It's bath water. There's nobody else out here. So everybody here learns to row singles. And we race singles and we trial in singles. And rowing a single fast is not the same thing as rowing an 8 fast, but it's probably closer to rowing an 8 than rowing erg fast is, right? So it's yet another piece of that. It's a single with a speed coach on it. You can get the data, and current changes, wind changes, all the rest. but we can go out and have speed orders. We can do time trials, and we can see who's moving boats in that way also. And it doesn't translate perfectly, but it's just another data point, which is very similar to the erg. And you see some of the same fears that you do on the erg, right? Because it's just me. It's just me. I've got this damn piece of electronics on it that's going to tell everybody how I did. And it's kind of a fun thing to be able to mix that in as well. So
yeah, and one of the I love one of the things that I always think about it, like you said, sometimes we have our best days when I think a lot of people perform worse when they start stacking all this expectation on their shoulders and they try to go about right, and it makes them even worse. Rather than, like you said, right, when you're in the summer, you're probably racing just as hard and you're probably going in many ways faster because you're free-minded, able to just attack it. And one of the things that I always think, or I guess bridging off of that, I want to talk about the current team and some of that stuff here as we kind of bridge into the second or the last little bit. But before we get to that, tips that you have for developing erg confidence, erg toughness, is that something that can be learned, or is it something that is innate to the athlete that you can't necessarily teach? So take that wherever you want, but tips that you would have to develop that toughness. And that could be as simple as, are there workouts that you think are great ones to help athletes kind of come out and break through limiting beliefs and obstacles? Take that wherever you want.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I don't think there's anybody that stays in this sport that doesn't have a pretty high degree of toughness, right? Just on an empirical level. Yes, you can develop it, and yes, there are a select few utter psychopaths who don't seem to care about hurting themselves in the least, repeatedly over and over and over. It doesn't bother them at all. Those are the lucky few. I think most of us, and I still put myself in that mix, I'm not that tough. Most of us grapple with it. Most of us have two sides where, wouldn't it be more fun just to sit around and eat the donuts and watch somebody else erg, as opposed to sitting down and going on it. I do think getting better on the erg is about proving to yourself that you can do it. It's biting off a little bit more, biting off a workout that might scare you in some ways, and then you realize, hey, not only is this not so bad, it's actually manageable, and actually I'm doing pretty well. I think you can use the erg incorrectly. I think you can use the erg to scare the shit out of people, and that's not what you're trying to do. You're not trying to, and sometimes we screw it up. When you have a practice where everybody eats it, well, then I asked for too much. I asked for the wrong thing at the wrong time. And I look at that as, okay, that was a failure as a coach because what I just did took us backward, right? It just made us more scared. It made us less confident of what we can do. So it really is trying to give the team something that they can not just do okay on, but that they have a chance to work hard at, do okay on, and then look back on and reflect and say, well, shit, if I did that, then it stands to reason that I can do a little better on this next thing. It just makes sense. It's hard to be rational when you're in the middle of a workout, but these are very smart, rational guys in between workouts, right? from one to the next. So I think in that way, you can get tougher. Now, it depends a little bit on how you define toughness, I guess. And there are some really awful workouts out there. Some of the failure workouts I think about. Chris Clark can explain his 5x5 failure workout at some point. I think he just did it. It just evolved one year, and he liked it so much that he did it every other year. And I try to copy it, probably with limited success. 5x5 failure is you basically have your guys pick a split that they think they can just barely hold for 5 minutes, just one piece. And if they pick incorrectly, you correct them and tell them what their split actually should be. None of them make it. They make it maybe 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, right? If they do make it, well, you didn't go hard enough. You didn't pick a hard enough split. You don't make it. What are you doing? You have to hang on to this, right? So you kind of go on through all 5 pieces, and you can't come out of it feeling good as an athlete or a coach. No matter what you do, if you make it, you didn't go hard enough. If you don't make it, you didn't go hard enough, right? But it gets to a point, it's a little bit like that, the bench pressing stuff, where you do so many bench presses that at some point you can't lift the bar. I mean, I feel like I remember that from high school. I don't know if there was anything valuable in that at all. But by the end, they're just barely hanging on. They're gassed. They're completely out of it, completely tired. And it gives you a concept of how long you can hang on. There's some other failure workouts too, a step test, where you're essentially just increasing watts and going again, increasing watts and going again. And every 30 seconds that you achieve, you get a few more points on the board. So there's incentive to get to the next 30 seconds. And that can get pretty brutal also. But mainly, I think it's learning, surprising yourself in a good way, and then taking that information and building from it. So you're trying to build yourself your own foundation of confidence that you're building on from there. And for those few psychopaths, those guys, and you may remember one or two from your coaching or your rowing career. There aren't that many of them, but there are a few. God knows what's going on in their heads. I'm not sure I want to know, but they're good. Those guys are game changers.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. And one of the ones I remember, and I don't know if those, but 23, 22, 21 break 6K was one that I remember that we did. And like, you only have, again, depends on the team. Some teams might be 22, 21, 20 for 6K,
right.
break
right.
6K goal. I'm sure that's for a lot of those top end programs. But I remember that one where it was like just survival for some of those, just get through the first one, make it to the second one, hang on for dear life, and then how far can you get for the third, and you'd have a percentage of the roster.
Yeah, right? Those are really good workouts, and they're interesting to me, whether it's 6K or 20 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever. The ones where you're stepping it down, that middle piece always feels terrible. It's always doable, but it always takes more effort than you think it should, and so it scares the hell out of you. But even when you make the third piece, that second piece just scares the crap out of you, which is a great workout.
Yeah.
Right. If it scares you and you survive it and you do well, that's probably a good confidence builder.
Yeah. Oh, I love those. That's awesome. I want to be conscious of your time. I want to just chat a little bit about just, Marietta, what you guys have, cooking out there, the team. And I think the way I wanted to bridge it, right, I want to just, spend a few minutes just kind of learning a little bit more about team and the roster and how you're building this program and all these fun things as you kind of kick off the fall and all this. But just the way I wanted to kind of kick things off to start is just talk to me a little bit about just what you guys have going on, what the team's looking like. You've got the first few races coming up ahead of Ohio, as you said. Then I know you guys have Boston and Philly coming up and all these different things. Just as you're in year 7, I think one of the things you said right before we logged on or right before we kind of started recording was, it seems like the athletes are coming back ready, and obviously the erg is where you kind of truly see that on paper. But talk a little about what's coming down the pike for the team and just go from there.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, we've worked, I don't want to say we've worked hard, but we've been working diligently for 6 years now to get the idea across that, in any sport, whether it's Division I or Division III, there really is no off season. Meaning that if you're going to be good at this, if you're going to put this kind of effort into it, you really do need to pour yourself into it all the way through the summers and through the winter break. And guys are drinking that Kool-Aid pretty admirably in a lot of ways, meaning that we have a ton of guys now that are going off to Craftsbury, going off to Vesper Boat Club, staying here and racing, but basically training and racing all summer. And most of that training and racing is in small boats. I mean, some of it was big boats, but so what you end up seeing is that every fall, guys are showing up in better and better shape, but they're also rowing better. they've taken more strokes, they've raced harder, and they're just moving boats visually a whole lot better than maybe they were 2 or 3 years ago. And the nice part about that is when you bring the freshmen in, freshmen will rise up to whatever level you're at almost right away. It's pretty rare for freshmen to get faster than what the varsity team is at. That's not easy, whatever that psychological thing is. So the better your varsity level is, honestly, it matters who your recruits are. We've gotten very lucky with a lot of these guys, but they rise up to it pretty seamlessly. So we're sort of in that transition right now. We haven't spent much time on the erg. The erg, it does bring reality crashing back in some respects. That these guys are not all sub 6 minute ergers just yet. Far from it. And power really does matter. It's one thing to be able to beat the other guys on your team, but we have to be able to beat other teams that are more powerful. But guys are good. They work hard. They are very willing, really supportive kids of each other. I mean, it's a really funny, hardworking group of guys. And that's been the case for a while now, which is a lot of fun to be around. I mean, it really is. Race wise, pretty typical stuff. I mean, we have long falls here. I mean, it doesn't ever get that cold at all, to be honest here. But we can probably assume that we'll be on the water, I would say up pretty close to Thanksgiving. But we'll race every Saturday in October. So we race in Pittsburgh, headed to Ohio. We run a race in conjunction with the Marietta Rowing Club, which is the high school here. We run a race that next to head of the Muskegon, which has become a bigger and bigger race. It's kind of a fun river to run head races on, and it's close enough to a lot of high schools in this area that it becomes a pretty big high school race, which is great for us because they don't otherwise necessarily get to Marietta. Then we'll do the head of the Charles. We're just sending an 8. The head of the Charles, we've only actually qualified for an automatic bid 1 year since I've been here, and that was the post-pandemic year. We haven't had terrible runs there. We haven't had great runs. And I look at it this year, I'm like, holy crap. Every boat in front of us is fast, and just about every boat behind us is fast. I mean, it's like, if you can't tell who the mark is, who's the slow boat? I can't tell. Oh, it's probably us. So, we're starting, I think, 20th, 21st out of 38 crews, so just below the halfway point. And if we could duck over that 50% mark, that would be awesome. We haven't really managed to do it very well lately. There's a lot of fast teams there. And then the head of the Schuylkill's the following week, and that's always been a great race for us. It's a really nice, it's a pretty broad section of speed, I would say, and we fit in somewhere in the middle. There's a bunch of teams that are faster than us for sure, and there's a lot of teams that I think we can run with pretty well too. So that has historically been a really fun race. Back in the day, Marietta was kind of colloquially known as Philly West. We had a whole lot of Philly guys here, and we still have some, maybe not as many, but it's there's a kinship with Philadelphia for whatever reason. So yeah, you should definitely come see it at some point, Coach. So yeah, we'll see. And in the spring, we sort of have twin goals here. We're one of the founders of the Dadville Regatta. So I just have to do this. I'm in what's called the Dadville Room right now.
Wow.
All the flags up here are the Dadville champions.
That's amazing.
Dating back to 1934. And we just did finally win another one at the Division III level this last year. So as a Division III team, which I guess whether we're newly minted or not, I'm not sure, but sort of newly classified as a D3 team, given what the school is, it kind of makes sense. The Dadville's evolving. The Division I race is only Division I at this point, so things are changing. We'll see where that goes, but our goals are to compete well, hopefully win the Dadville, and then also hopefully qualify, and not just qualify, but hopefully make the grand finals at the IRA. We got close this last year. We raced the IRA, and close as no cigar, we ended up last. I mean, there's 8 teams, and good racing, not great racing. And no slam on our guys. It's just kind of the way it shook out. So we need to be better, right? And I think we can be. I think that it had been a long time since we raced 8s at the IRA, and I forget how sort of starstruck guys can get, right? I've been around it for a long time. It's exciting for me to see all the teams, but I think it's a little bit. Sometimes it can kind of overwhelm guys on your team in ways that I didn't anticipate, probably as well as I could have. So if we can get back again this year, it's in Sacramento, which has its own issues, but it'll also be a lot of fun. But if we can get back, I think we'll be a little bit more ready for it. So that's the year, and it's a great place to be. It's different than a lot of places I've been in that I was, born and bred in a place where everything was about walk-ons, and we work really hard to get walk-ons here, and we do. We have several walk-ons in each class who are really influential and really important. But in a school that's bouncing around about 1,100 kids right now total, 55% right now are athletes. The numbers, just the sheer numbers of available male students to consider walking on, it's small. So we got a few. We've got a handful of kids right now, including a former football player. He's a sophomore. Decided he didn't want to play football anymore, and he's going to be good. He's going to be good if he continues to like it. But he's competitive and doesn't mind hurting himself. Those are pretty great qualities. So yeah, it'll be a fun year for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing, Coach. This was awesome. My last question for you is just piece of advice that you would have for any athlete who wants to row at the college level and be a contributor to a varsity 8, to a men's college program at any level, whether it's D1, D3, grand final program, or, Dadvale, whatever it may be. Just they're in high school right now, sophomore, junior, senior, whatever it may be, and they want to row at a college program and be a contributor at some point in that journey, when they do go off to college. Last thing, but piece of advice that you would have for those athletes sitting there today thinking about, is that possible?
Well, I never actually answered the question that you asked, but it's interesting when I'm going around to talking to other, talking to high school teams in the area and elsewhere, how many kids are in really good programs and doing really well that will say to me, and I don't think it's false humility, will say, "Oh, I'm not sure that I'm cut out to be a college athlete. I don't know if I can keep doing this." And some of them are probably saying, I'm not sure that I want to keep rowing. But a lot of them are saying, I don't think I have what it takes to be a college rower. And that's just complete bullshit. Meaning that there is a place at a good college program for any of these guys if they want to be a part of it. If they like what they're doing now in high school, if it's important, and it has to be important to them, or you would never do it, right? It's if it's not any fun, if it's not a part of who you are, I just don't see the value in doing this. I mean, it's a lot of misery if you're not enjoying it. So there is a spot for you. There is absolutely a spot for you. I would also say, if you have dreams, if you want to be the star or you want to be on the team, I'll throw Princeton out there, right? Let someone else tell you no. Meaning, reach out, sell yourself, and keep reaching out until you have heard a hard, it's not going to happen. And if that's happened, okay, great. But don't hang back out of some sense of embarrassment or whatever else, right? Coaches will tell you no. They will if they need to. But don't short circuit yourself, right? If you have a dream on that. And the last thing is, just wherever you end up going, go in both feet. Go in wholeheartedly. Give it what you got, right? You have to have patience, and you have to have a little impatience also. right? You don't just want to stay in the same place all the time, but you have to recognize that it's a I don't want to call it a marathon, but it's certainly not a sprint through your college career. And there's a lot of ups and downs, and it's an incredibly rewarding thing. As much fun as awesome as high school rowing is, college rowing is just more of the same and even better, surrounded by better athletes, stronger athletes, and really, really good people. There's so many good programs at every level, and there's so many good coaches. 10, 15 years ago, and I can't remember who I was talking to, a really good coach. And he was sort of half jokingly lamenting that there just weren't any crappy coaches anymore. It's like there are no teams you can just assume you're going to beat because they're all so goddamn well coached, and he was laughing. I was just like, God, there are no crappy teams here because sometimes it's nice to have a few gimmies. But the cool thing about that is there's so many options. There's so many good options, and it means you're not going to make a bad choice unless it doesn't fit for whatever reason, right? If you love New York City, don't come to Marietta. We're not New York City, right? If you love being out in the country, probably don't want to go to GW, right? You're right downtown. But there's visit the school, see what you think. If it fits, get to know the guys, see what the personality is, see how they interact with the coaches. And I think for the most part, you're going to see places that you would love to be a part of and go. And it's a ball. You're just not going to go wrong. And the other part of it is there's going to be so many great teams to race. You always think, oh, crap, I don't want to race. Yes, you do. You want to race fast teams. You want to race teams that it's meaningful to beat them if you can. And if you can't, it's meaningful to have gotten as close as you could, right? That's what makes the whole experience worthwhile. So it's an awesome place. College rowing is fantastic. I guess I probably should say it. I've been involved in it for a while now, right? If I didn't love it, there'd be something more than a little wrong with me. But yeah, that's more than one piece of advice, wasn't it? Sorry.
No, I love it. And all those are great takeaways for anyone. So I think that's a great place. We could do a whole nother 2-3 hours, but I know it's the middle of fall season. I want to be conscious of your time. I know you got things to do, but Coach Myhr, this was an absolute blast. I really appreciate, again, we could totally do a round 2 down the line at another time because I could pick your brain forever just learning things and a lot of fun topics like that. So thank you so much for coming on. I know you're going to be up in Boston. I will as well. I know you're going to be in Philly for the Head of Schuylkill. I will obviously be here as well. So I know we'll connect in person at some point in October. But good luck as you guys prepare for fall racing. And again, thank you so much for coming on. This was a blast.
Coach Leslie, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.